The issue of femicide, abuse of children, for me, is just a nice national crisis in many ways. There is a study that everybody can find online called Femicide, the Situation is Getting Worse. It was released towards the beginning of the year. And what Odipodev and African Uncensored were able to document was that there were 170 women who were murdered in 2024. This is double the number that were killed in 2023, double, right? And 5 times more than the number that was killed in 2016. The nature of the killings are just brutal. We have a mandate to protect all human rights for all human beings at all times. So there's a universality. We talk about it, that every human being has the same degree of rights as every other human being.
I want to take you back to a cold night in Nairobi late in 2022. A young man, barely 23, is snatched from the street outside his home. No charges, no explanation. His family is left scouring hospitals and mortuaries for days. Eventually, he's found dead, tortured, damp, and unrecognizable on a riverbed. No justice, no closure. Just another file on the growing list of Kenya's unsolved and forced disappearances. Stories like this are too far common, and for many in the diaspora, they haunt us across time zones because we know that that could be our cousin, it could be our sibling, it could be our friend. It's in that space between outrage and helplessness that human rights work becomes not just important, but very urgent. And that's where tonight's guest comes in. He's been called the most persistent voice in Kenya's civic space. He is the executive director of Amnesty International Kenya, a fierce advocate for justice, a policy strategist, and a public intellectual who's comfortable at the UN as he is in the grassroots of Kibra County. Kibra constituency, not county, but maybe it will be a county one day. From leading landmark coalitions against police brutality to fighting for the rights of sexual violence survivors. Irungu Houghton has put himself on the front lines again and again. And a fun fact before we get started, before all this activism, Irungu was once a DJ and shared a stage with a reggae band. So tonight's guest isn't just serious, but he also got range. And now he's here in the US. Irungu, karibu sana to the One Mic Show. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, and thank you very much, Bandio, Ali, Mike, Omosh, and Micah. Let me just first, for the purpose of the viewers, and just let them know that actually this is a very rich studio. They have more than one mic.
Okay.
Secondly, it is as I came here, I thought the Kilimanjaro studio would be cold because I have climbed Kilimanjaro.
Okay.
And just say it's nice and warm, and I hope that those of you who are listening actually reach out to your friends, your family, and join us for the next 3 hours. As we know, we are good marathon runners. We don't do half shows. I was going to say something that probably would not be good for children.
Okay.
We are here for the next 3 hours.
We'll tell them to tell their children to go to bed soon.
Let them join.
But real quick,
particularly if they're from Butere.
Yeah, real quick, you talked about Kilimanjaro studios. How does this compare to a lot of... You've been to so many studios.
Yeah, like I'm it's just an opportunity to diss all the studios that I've been, but just to say this is one of the best studios I've been in, to be really honest, actually.
Okay.
So I've done Spice, I've done the NTV ones, I've done 96 Hot FM, I've done a whole bunch of them. What I like about this is it's cozy, it's it's warm. Everybody who's not in the United States of America at the moment, this place is cold.
Yes.
on a number of levels.
Nah, bado.
Yeah.
Nah, bado.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, just correct you, there can only be one.
One mic.
Yeah, but now there's more than one mic.
But there can only be one.
Okay, all right. So all we need is one mic. Now, first things first, Irungu. Why are you currently in the US, and what specifically brings you to the DMV area? Are you on some benchmarking? We see a lot of Kenyan executive, Kenyan politicians and people in government positions always coming here for benchmarking and capacity building and all that kind of stuff. So what brings you to the US?
So I have had a long-standing invitation from several universities across the U.S. To come and speak to law faculties and to political science faculties. So the University of Berkeley, University of Texas, and American University had asked me to come and talk to them about Amnesty's work and the work of human rights. And this was probably the first moment, I think, in the last year when I had enough time to come and do that. I also, the reason I'm in the studio today is that because I was 3 or 4 days ago, I was in Los Angeles and I listened to Martha Karo on the show. And I said, this is a great show. And Ali instructed me to come to DC and to Maryland at least, and to join the show. So that's why I'm in this particular hot seat. But I think the other thing just to mention is I'm here in terms of DC primarily to understand the new administration and how it will look at Kenya, how it will look at the rest of the world and Africa, because human rights has been very important. We are, I guess, we live in an international community in which the resources that are required to do global poverty work or global health work are very important. So that's partly why I'm here. I'm happy to share what I've learned so far.
Okay. That is very amazing. And of course, we're going to be talking about that more in detail. Now, maybe for those who may not know you beyond the headlines, who is Irungu and what exactly does Amnesty International Kenya do? Very basic question, but I will shock you by telling you that there's a lot of people even out here in the diaspora who don't know what Amnesty International. So Irungu and Amnesty International Kenya.
Yeah. So Irungu joined Amnesty International Kenya 7 years ago, and I was at that point very worried about the deterioration of human rights, particularly over the 2017 elections. So I saw a lot of brutalization, I saw a lot of pain and misery, and it seemed to me that this would be a good space to come and work. And I then joined. I've been working on various issues. I love this job. It's been a real opportunity to kind of serve and see change really in people's lives. And I hope to talk about some of the human stories that we've come into contact with. Amnesty International is an international human rights organization. Globally we are 63 or more years old. We are present in 70 countries across the world. We have a mandate to protect all human rights for all human beings at all times. So there's a universality. We talk about it that every human being has the same degree of rights as every other human being. In Kenya, we were registered in 2012, but it's not the first time that we worked in Kenya. We were there in the 1970s, 1980s. There is not probably a politician over the age of 50 today that was active as a student or a journalist or a worker or as a lawyer that at some point did not come into contact with the protection of Amnesty International. One of the most beautiful photographs that really inspires me always is sitting in the Amnesty International USA office here in Washington. We have the same one in Amnesty International Kenya, and that's a picture of Gitobu Manyara, and he came out in 1991. He was beaten so severely by police officers that he had brain damage. And Amnesty managed to fly him out of the country where he was stabilized, and he went back and continued to protect other people's rights. And every time I see Gitobu, I realize that this is an organization that is really to be proud of.
Okay, and Gitobu has been one of the more consistent people in the human rights space in just agitating for justice, for fairness, and for so many other things, whether when he was in parliament and when he was out of parliament. And I think it's very interesting to now learn, how this gels into figures that we've known that are icons within this space. And this is something, and I love these kinds of conversations because a lot of people are not familiar and are not aware of this. So I want to now get to introduce the rest of the panel because, as you know, as always, we have a couple of people. But before that, I'm going to read a few comments that were coming in. Yakobo Simba is still stuck on Super Bowl champs Tupo, kina Dak Prescott watulie. All right, Yakobo, tumekubali. Philadelphia Eagles are the Super Bowl champions, but we're coming for you next season. And then Slay Odwar is also in the building. Tabitha Njeri is saying, whoa, those are nice comments about the studio. Na sijui kwa nini amemtag Mubelo wa Bandio peke yake, yet we are all part of Kilimanjaro Studios. Tabitha, you have some explaining to do. Nyuma ya tent, Tabitha. You have some explaining to do. And then Apa Mwakisha Mgendi anasema ako DMV na hatujui. Well, now umejua. And because you're tuned into the One Mic Show, this is some of the perks you get when you tune into the One Mic Show.
Kabisa.
And then also I have Daniel Monari. He's saying it is not censorship.
In quotes.
It is, in quotes, it is protecting school-age minors and it's protecting school-age minors from political exploitation by the likes of Malala. So that's a sarcastic comment coming in. Yeah. So Asema, it is not censorship, and we're going to come to Mika. That was Mika making his presence felt. We're going to come to him shortly.
Hey, we know he's in the studio.
Yes, we know he's in the studio. Atakama is not in the studio, but he's in the studio. And then, again, it is the censorship is in quotes for those who do not understand what quotes are. Yeah. So very good sarcastic comment there coming from Daniel Monari. Then we have Doris Ngauja. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. Doris says, I am up at 3 a.m. to hear Irungu, a man I respect. Doris, tell us where you're tuned in from. Where is it 3 a.m.? Is it Nairobi? Is it Mombasa? Is it Wajir? Is it Wargadud? Please tell us where you're tuned in from.
Rwanda,
yeah. And then Slay is also in the building. Again, number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. We have Irungu in studio with us talking about human rights. But for the moment, I'm gonna come to DJ Omoshfire. And DJ Omoshfire, when we were having a conversation about this upcoming episodes, some of the things that we wanted to talk about, because we see that many Kenyans see human rights as disconnected and distant. And one of the questions that you were actually advocating for is about the average Kenyan, both in Kenya and abroad. Salimia the audience and talk to us about what you feel about that average Kenyan that maybe Irungu can address before we go to Mika. DJ Moshfire, karibu sana. You have competition today.
Asante. Yeah. Karibu to the studio, Bwana Irungu. This is a very he's such a breath of
fresh air.
Is that what it is?
No, it's fresh air.
Fresh air. Yeah. But Asante for making time to come and spend your 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours here with us. Na vile umesema ni marathon, tutaendelea tu, ni sawa tu. And so, when it comes to human rights, as a regular, or as, I guess I'd say, citizens, or in some cases, netizens, why should we care? After all, it's not affecting me. So, what's all this about human rights? Juu mimi kwangu, watu wanakula, watu wanalala, tuko job. Why should I care about human rights?
No, I think it's a great question. But, the question is only asked in that way by somebody who is privileged and has power. Somebody who is able to take care of their meals, they have shelter over their heads, their kids have schools to go to. Now, just imagine that 47% of Kenyans don't have that experience, right? 40%, 70% of the country basically struggle with just what are the basic needs. The work that Amnesty does is not in, it's not in CBD, it's not in the Muthaigas, the Karens and so on. Much of the work we do is in the informal settlements. If you look at Nairobi, 50% of the young people who are shot by police officers unlawfully are, from urban informal settlements like Mathare, Mukuru and Kibra and others. It's not the people who are powerful and privileged whose homes are bulldozed by construction officers and police officers from the local county. The work we've done with Kibos, the community that in 2021 was essentially brought to its knees. 3,500 people lost their homes in 5 days. Or if you look at a little bit later in that year, what happened in Mukuru kwa Jenga, where 40,000 people essentially had their homes bulldozed, not over a few hours, but over a few days. Now imagine a place like Kilimani. I think most of the viewers will be familiar with these places. Kilimani has a population, had at the last census of about 40,000. Imagine Kilimani being pushed into rubble over a period of 4 days, and nobody took action. No media house came out to the rescue of that community. No human rights organization came out to protect that community. And when I walked onto the ground and the rubble of Mukuru after 2 or 3 days, I was ashamed that we had not gone there faster. Human rights targets primarily people who are vulnerable, who are marginalized, but it can go anyway. I remember at one point being invited to speak at the National Police Conference, and at that time, this was under the Jubilee administration. The Cabinet Secretary was Fred Matiang'i, and I started the presentation by this, and I said to him, Bwana Waziri, there is no T-shirt that is made that says, I am Matiang'i's son or daughter, don't shoot me.
Correct.
Your children have exactly the same potential risk of being unlawfully killed as anybody else's child. Your daughters have the same risk of the 170 young women who were battered and sexually assaulted and killed in 2024. So I think it's really important for people to understand that, if a few people aren't safe, then nobody is safe.
Wow. That is so powerful. I think even
sure
DJ Omosh doesn't have a comeback to that from a fellow DJ.
I have a comeback. I have
He
another
has,
one.
but he has to use turntables.
Okay, he has to use turntables.
Wow.
Yeah.
At that point, he will flatten me. Can I just
Yes.
confess something?
Sure.
So I have my phone up here, and some of you can probably see it. I've been trying to Shazam every song that you've been playing up until now, with no
success.
With no success.
Oh,
so
that's
actually,
DJ Omosh fire.
the truth will be this.
Yeah.
Before I leave, I need the playlist.
Sour.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay,
I got you.
And you need some time on the decks too. Ama you hapo.
So I'm now 58. I was doing that when I was 25. You do the math.
Now, that's also very interesting. Now, before we go back to Mika, I was very shocked when I learned about your age, because I've never known, how old you are. I have to say, you look very young.
And a spring chicken.
Yes, you look very young. So I was surprised in some interview I had, and you were talking about a grandchild. I was like, is this guy talking about
other people's children?
His grandchild, ama he's talking about other people's grandchildren, because he clearly doesn't have one. So that got me a bit aback. So whatever you're doing, please leave us with a secret formula.
Drink water.
yeah.
Don't take yourself seriously.
If we give you
And stay in the studio.
the real story behind hata wewe.
Sasa Omosho umeongea na tunaambiwa siri ya kubariki vijana.
Sorry.
Okay. And then another thing that's also happening here, people are correcting me. Tabitha is correcting me. She's telling me it's Irongo, not Irungu. But then I see a U, and U in Bantu languages is pronounced as U. Lugha zetu za Kibantu, Kiswahili nini, it's pronounced as U. But and then there was another thing that happened that you are not privy to. I had a mini fight with Unomike because there are those two in French. They are called accent aigu or accent grave.
Tildas.
Matilda.
And I told him.
Sio
Wacha
Matilda.
tusikie.
Hiyo ni mingi. Tildas.
Kisungu mingi. So hiyo hapo, I just ignored it.
Pierre had that thing in his name. Yes, I do had those things in his name.
I think I don't know whether Pierre had it, but there are other French names that had those accents. But it's called a tilde. It's not an accent. Yeah, Matilda. Yeah. So we had a mini fight because I had not included it in the flyer, and it was a bit late. So it became a mini fight.
It got violent.
Yeah, it got virtually violent, but we were trying to move on. So I think when I see that means it's an O and not an U.
Irogo.
Sorry. Okay. So even pronounce the nga, it's go. Irogo.
Because they're
When he says Irongo.
Both
use have them.
it's Irungu.
Irungu?
Yeah, Irungu.
It was Southwest.
Irungu.
Nairobi West.
Nairobi West.
Nairobi
West accent, my guys.
Nirosh.
Yeah. Sawa. Before we get lost here, I wanna invite Mika. There's Mika always has a man on the ground perspective, which I've really been appreciating over time, because sometimes we miss this bar, especially living here in the diaspora, and most of us having grown up in Nairobi. So Mika, as you get started, ukisalimia watu, where do international human rights organizations like Amnesty intersect with our local Kenyan struggles? This is a question that I think we're going to direct to Irongo. Are the foreign frameworks... Are they foreign frameworks, or are these rooted in African realities? This is something that I want to talk to. But Mika, I want you to talk about this a bit, before we present this question back to Irongo. Mika.
Thank you, Ali. And thank you, Irosh, DJ Irosh. Ulikuwa DJ nani kwanza?
Irosh.
DJ Irosh. You see, unaona mimi nimepata watu wakijaribu kutafuta hapa Matilda na nini. Matilda na watu wengine. Anyway, I guess my question to what I wanted to say is that, or rather how I'd like to bring it up to this is that, so far in Kenya, we have so far up to date from the beginning of the year, we have, I think the last time I checked, we have more than 128 women who have been killed in the hands of people they know, or people who are supposed to be protecting them, or due to domestic abuse, like basically femicide. And it's become such a rampant thing that it's turning into one of those normal crimes that happen into the country. Mm-hmm. And when we speak of human rights, I believe women are part of humanity, and those rights are afforded to them. They're allowed to be able to continue their life without feeling worried that they're going to be killed. We see nearly every week a story on the news whereby a body was found stuffed in a sack, a body was found in a well, a body was found in an abandoned room, and somebody just left and they were with the people who they were supposed to be with them, and then they end up dead. What are some of the things that Amnesty International is, as Aliyah said, coming into work in togetherness with Kenya? I think some of these issues that we're seeing in the country, how do we come to educate people on the rights of protection of these lives of women? And mine, I cannot say it's just women alone, but I wanted to be able to speak about the issue of femicide that's happening in the country. Why is it an increase in it? And what steps do you think that as an organization you can use to educate people in the country on the rights that women are supposed to be afforded, and also the preservation of women's life, so that you can end this bad trajectory that is going on in the country? I wanted also to throw in another thing is child abuse, children rights in the country. We see stories of a 9-year-old was hit in the nail with a nail, or the head with a nail by their step-parent or by their parent because they disobeyed something, or a kid is burnt because he stole 5 shillings to go to something. Children are being displaced every day, as you say, in places like Mukuru, and their houses are bulldozed. Do we take into consideration that there are children who are supposed to come from school and spend the night there, who we don't know where they're going to see? How can we be able to protect children in the country, not just from abuse, but hunger, provision of basic needs that they need, better education, protection of children to be able to express themselves? We seem to have a government that is very scared of children. Right, we have a government that likes fighting children. I've never seen a government like this one that is really very happy to hurt young people. And yes, let's start with those, and then we'll add up another topic.
Okay, so much to unpack from Mika. Irongo.
No, just Mika, thank you. It's a really heavy matter. I mean, the issue of femicide, abuse of children, for me is just a nice national crisis in many ways. There is a study that everybody can find online called "Femicide: The Situation is Getting Worse." It was released towards the beginning of the year, and what Odipodev and African Uncensored were able to document was that there were 170 women who were murdered in 2024. This is double the number that were killed in 2023, double, right? And 5 times more than the number that was killed in 2016. The nature of the killings are just brutal, right? I was at Quarry. I was a first time responder. And I watched as the recovery of body parts happened, and it was just the most worrying thing. The study also goes to show that Nairobi, Kiambu, and Nakuru are the most dangerous counties for women, if I can put it that way.
Nairobi, Kiambu, and Nakuru.
Yeah.
Okay.
The trend is rising. For those of you in Kisii or other who have relatives in Kisii, Kitui, Meru, and Nyeri, the numbers are growing there also.
Mm-hmm.
What we are essentially finding is that, of these 170 women, 60% of the women were attacked and killed in their homes. 17%, so it's about just under a third of that, were in the public. What does that mean? It means that home is where the hatred is found. Right? And that's really scary.
And what exactly do you mean
where
by
they're
home?
supposed to be safe?
Yeah.
What exactly do you mean by home is where the hatred is found? Maybe break that down for us.
For women to be unsafe in the homes that they live is probably the most ironic, bizarre statistic I think I've ever come across.
Wow.
Homes are places where, they're places of sanctuary. They're places of safety. They're places where you have the capacity to design your space. It's not in the public spaces. The people who are killed, 60% of the people who are killed are not killed by strangers. They're killed by people they know, relatives, friends, lovers, husbands, fathers, grandfathers. This is what we're looking at. So we have to acknowledge that there is a fundamental breakdown in terms of the respect for women, and in particular, the respect for women's independence. I mean, I think that's what we see. Most of the cases, as we talk to, people who are familiar with this work, they will tell us that ultimately what happened was a man was rebuffed. He flirted, he asked for something, he demanded something, she refused, and that's how the violence happened. And I think what we have to do is recognize that, incarceration, the imprisonment of men will not deal with this problem, right? I'm not suggesting that they should not be imprisoned. I'm saying that everybody who breaks the law should be imprisoned. But I think if we step back and look at the macro statistics, we're going to have to come to the conclusion that there is a way in which we are not socializing men. We are allowing men to, as they say, to kind of breathe this toxic masculinity that suggests that, I can't be told off by a woman. I can't accept for a woman to reject my sexual advances. I cannot debate a woman on our finances without getting violent. And I think that's the nature of the beast that we have to deal with. Statistics are one thing, but I think it's really important to just remember some of the cases. And I'm going to give you a couple of cases just so that, people can, even as we're talking, they can just Google and search these names. And people like Rita Waeni, Scarlett Wahoo, they suffered the most horrendous deaths and unnecessary. Like you think about it and you realize that these were actually young people who essentially got into an argument with a significant other, a partner, in many cases, and they were butchered.
Wow. What you're saying is so profound in the sense that, like the normal average person thinking will say that a lot of this violence comes from far. But you're saying that statistics show that a lot of this comes from people who are very close and sometimes within the home. And also talking about this, the men, and the men that we're breeding, and you said that jailing them is not going to solve this problem. There's a question here coming from Tabitha, where she's saying, I would love to know his take on the red pill online masculinity coaching on potential femicide or abuse in the home, if he has a take. Because there's been a growth of these masculinity spaces. I mean, of course, I don't want to mention names. We have our share in Kenya, and there's a share. And some of these spaces are really quite popular. There's some that have global audiences. So talk to Tabitha about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess online spaces, social media platforms have become a space where it is now cool to call for battering of women, to call for violence against women. And I think we have to call out that culture. There is nothing wrong with men talking to men. In fact, one of the things that I was struck by in this audience is that in this studio is like we are a manual. So maybe we should just have a conversation about masculinity, right?
Yes.
And actually the women, I think, would love that, because I think there is a growing number of women who really want men to talk to men. On Valentine's Day, the Safisha Rada group basically appropriated the idea of the men's conference. And what they
For
did...
those who don't know, who is the Safisha Rada group?
So this...
Sasa kina Abel Mutua.
Blind spots. Tuko diaspora.
Tuko diaspora.
Okay. So Abel Mutua, the one you mentioned, is one of the key leaders.
Mm-hmm.
But as all Gen Zs will tell you, they are leaderless, they are fearless, they are tribeless.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a group of men who actually came together and just said, okay, what does it mean to be a Kenyan male at this time?
Mm-hmm.
And they're having some really profound conversations. And one of the profound conversations is, how do we equip men to be strong enough to walk away from an argument? Like, how can you have an argument and not have it lead to violence? How can you have an argument that is skillful enough that people don't feel bruised and battered on both sides, emotionally? So I think the investment now that we need to see, particularly for those of you fathers that are on this call, is actually, fathers spending time with their sons.
Very important.
It is so important, and not demonizing. I mean, I think that's the other thing that unfortunately has begun to happen, is that there can be a very very sharp backlash against misogynistic, as the language would go, misogynistic men who are sexist. But I think what we have to do is to start having these conversations with them to get a sense of what's the base of this. Like, why do you feel the need to dominate every space, right? What is it that didn't happen? Many of the young people today, many of the young men today did not have father figures, right?
Yeah.
Many of them did not see a father, express themselves emotionally. Many of them did not see what it's like to be coached by a father figure, right? And that's not their fault, right? But what happens is when they grow up to become a man, the child in them still has not matured.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's an area where I would like to see Amnesty do more work on that, to be honest. We do a lot of work on calling for example, safe houses for women. Mm-hmm. We're part of the End Femicide Alliance. It's a great alliance that was developed and actually was one of the most organized social movements last year. And they are doing great work to demand funding, to demand recognition of this as a national crisis. They've just got a gender minister, but they had said, there should be a ministry for gender, right?
Okay.
And there should be, sufficient budgets to be able to deal with this issue. But I think also what we need to do is we need to see attention being paid to what they call this manosphere, which is, I think, what Tabitha is talking about. It's like these spaces that are created for men against women, not just men for men. It's
men against women. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's some private one in WhatsApp groups.
I'm sure.
Yeah, which sometimes are very explosive. I personally sometimes being there just to understand what people are talking about. So there are some groups that are mean silently, and it's good to know, like, this is what the majority is saying. So we have to deal with them from where they are to try to get them where they should be. Now I'll still on this topic, and I'm going to come back to the comments. A number of comments.
I've not touched on the issue of child abuse, but let's go there.
Yes. So as we're still on this issue, because there's it's still on child abuse, because I was going to talk about sexual violence as a tool for intimidation, and I think we can also talk about child abuse here, because a lot of child abuse is also sexual abuse is part of child abuse. So there's a lot of sexual violence that has been used as a tool for intimidation, and I acknowledge some of the listeners we have here that we're engaging during the week, they were suggesting some of these questions. Kinawasheke, Kinawanjeri, thank you so much for providing these questions and using it as a tool for intimidation. There was an alleged rape of a male blogger in Mombasa. So what is actually happening behind the scenes? Is there any kind of accountability when it comes to perpetrators of such crimes, and where does Amnesty International come in here for the regular person to understand? Because we saw there was the videos were going round, and there was an alleged suspect who was part of the, and like I said again, it's alleged because we have no proof whatsoever. But I don't know whether that case came to any conclusion or if it just disappeared. So these are the things that Kenyans see both back home and here, and people get fearful that you can go say something and they will send someone to you to do this. Irongo.
So maybe just on the case of the blogger in Mombasa that was sodomized severally by people allegedly on the instruction of the senior officials. I think even the governor was implicated from the Mombasa county government. That case is still in court. It hasn't gone away. One of the things we've learned as Amnesty International is that if we do not keep public interest and public eye vigilance on cases, they tend to disappear and they do not come to conclusion. So it is really important for us to continue reminding the public of these cases, and that's why it's so good that you have raised this particular case.
Yeah, we
try to keep eyes on courts. Some of your viewers will probably remember the case of baby Brighton Sagini, the young child from Kisii, and that was a moment where I had both chills and also a sense of, I guess just a sense of power and agency, because this young child essentially was targeted by a grandmother, his grandmother, his aunt and his uncle and a cousin. And they went after the child to kill the child, to kill baby Sagini, because 16 years later, he was a 2-year-old. 16 years later, he would inherit his father's land because he was in the patrilineal line. And you can't imagine what that's like, right? So you mean family members can see a 2-year-old child, an infant, and create a plan and carry out a plot that would essentially kill a child prematurely by 16 years to try and protect or rather to grab the land that would have gone to this child. It's just insane. The case, of course, got national attention. A lot of people got involved. Our chapter in Kisii, so I haven't mentioned this, but we have chapters in several parts of the country. So we have 110 chapters in about just under 40 chapters. Chapter is typically...
And this is Kenya.
This is Kenya. We're just discussing Kenya at the moment. Yeah. So we have 1,500. We're a membership organization. I should start there. We're a membership organization. Anybody who's listening us to now, including the fine gentlemen in this space here, can register to become members. We take all kinds of currency. It's relatively painless, and that gives you the opportunity to essentially become my boss, because Amnesty International Kenya does not report to a foreign capital. We report to a Kenyan board that is elected from Kenyan members. Okay. So this is something that's happened over the last 3 years.
Important to know.
Yeah,
important to know.
So this is something new with Amnesty International.
Yeah. This is new.
Because there's some
Amnesty Kenya. Sorry.
It's Amnesty Kenya. So of the most of the I guess would you say the country offices across the world are built around this democratic model. We're accountable to members who then meet in an annual delegates conference, and then the annual delegates conference appoint the board. But historically, Amnesty would invest in a country and they would direct the human rights work from there. Yeah. But one of the things they did was to direct it to become independent. So Kenya became independent 3 years ago. One of our chapters in Kisii took on the case of baby Sagini. And they pushed and they monitored the court case and they continued. And in the case of baby Sagini, the 3 relatives were found guilty within a 6-month period. Right?
Wow.
That's
a short time within the Kenyan legal system.
That's
a record time
because Kenyan
these cases take even 5 years.
2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So you take the case of baby Pendo. We're working on that case now. Baby Pendo was killed in 2017.
Wow.
She would be 8 now.
Oof.
Right? If she had not been killed by police officers.
Oh, that is very painful. That is very painful.
So public engagement, vigilance, involvement of citizens is probably the most powerful weapon in terms of pushing back against human rights abuses. And let me just put it this way. Those circles are not paid. These are voluntary circles. These are volunteers. These are regular. Many of them are teachers. Many of them are, workers. Many of them are lawyers and doctors and so on. So they don't get paid to do this work. They get paid. Well, they do get paid, but not in cash. They get paid with the victory and the achievement that actually the attempted killing of baby Sagini, the perpetrators were found guilty.
Okay. Number to call, 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. And of course, you're tuned into the OneMicShow, and I'm your host and producer, Ali Badawi. We are talking with the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, Irungu Houghton. We've just unpacked, likewise here in the DMV, and why human rights should matter to every Kenyan. Now, coming up shortly is a discussion on the crackdown on Butere Girls High School actors by police over the play Echoes of War. But nothing divides Kenyans more than the LGBTQ issue. So stay tuned, because we will also be diving onto this topic shortly. Are LGBTQ rights a genuine human rights issue in Kenya, or is it a Western agenda being shoved down our throats? I want you to keep it locked for that and more. Our lines are open. The number to call, 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. I'm going to read a few comments here before we continue with a conversation, because they were coming in thick and fast. Leo watu wa YouTube wamelala, but Facebook is active as usual. Yeah. I don't know what's going on YouTube. YouTube, tell us something. Tell us you're kicking and breathing so that we are sure that you're there. I can see many people just watching.
Kuna watu hapo.
Yes. So Apa, I can see just going back to what Washeke was saying earlier, all the set book students do in high schools have themes of political activism and revolution. So how is this play any different? We're going to be talking about that shortly. And Slay agrees with her. She says, facts. I think the year I cleared high school, we had 3 books that was about politics. I can also see Lawrence Kianya from Baltimore in the building, Brown Sugar from Atlanta in the building, so karibuni sana, and then I can also see let me see hapa Brown Sugar na salimia watu, and then Daniel Monari. I think Daniel Monari was serious actually earlier when he spoke, and it wasn't just quotes. He's saying it's questionable if it's okay to use minors in secondary schools to be exploited for political purposes by anyone, including Malala. So I think Daniel Morari is bringing a contrary opinion. So Daniel, please tell us a bit more. Talk to us. Tell us a bit more.
He's calling.
And again, yeah, 202-683-4570. Tuliza Mbegumika. Let people with this different alternatives speak, so that we get to understand that this is what actually some people have in their minds.
Acha nauliza swali. Hao watu walisomea wapi? Hawako enda drama festival hapo, because mimi nilikuwa shule yenye tulikuwa tunashinda drama festival kwa Kakamega High School. Drama zetu, play zetu zote zilikuwa zinaingilia Moi. Na ilikuwa time ya Moi. Moi hakuwa tuambia tunatumiwa kufanya political stuff. How many times have Malala amekuwa akiandika plays za Butere Girls for how many years? Hata kuna play yake 2013 Uhuru alikuwa amekataa, ilikuwa inaitwaje Shackles of
Freedom or Doom.
Shackles of Doom, yeah. So, nani alikuwa amekataa haya. Ile play ya the year before that, The Burdens from Kakamega High School. Si pia ilikuwa imekataliwa na kina Uhuru bado. It's still.
So Rika, we'll get to that. We're going to be discussing all that in detail shortly. But yes,
if Daniel calls.
Yeah. So Daniel, 202-683-4570, press *5 to speak. And this is the People's Kamkunji. It's an open space. We want to hear your thinking. We want to hear your train of thought to understand, why, you take this position. So
we have a call from Australia.
Okay, so we already have a call from Australia. So before we get the call from Australia, let me read a few more comments here. Let me see. Stephen Bati anasema, are we witnessing a clash between the traditional values and the so-called modern values coming to play when we are looking at this issue of misogyny in men? I think this was a conversation we had before. And Dr. Vera Chaba is also tuned in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wow, another very powerful question that Irungu, I want you to write it down. You'll answer this later. How can we donate financially as diaspora? This is such a worthy cause. That's from Tabitha Njeri. Yeah, and Tabitha, we are still waiting for your phone call. 202
she won't call.
683-4570. Press *5 to speak. Well, okay. Let's find out. You wanna bet?
Yes.
Unajua betting ni haram. So ni bet lakini ni haram. Ni haram hiyo hapo.
Watu wa Ramadan. Okay,
sawa.
Kujaga na nini
Wazee kahasho.
Alafu hapa Afro-Jamaican. We also have a Jamaican who always tunes in to us. He loves Kenya so much. Afro-Jamaican says, I am still banned on YouTube. Oh my goodness, what did you do there?
What did you not do?
I think he must have, maybe he used that name.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah.
And they tagged it to the movie, and then there was some copyright.
Yes.
And so, anyway, let's move on.
Okay. So Afro-Jamaican is saying, we and Drama Club in Jamaica, and we did plays in the real situations affecting us. So this was happening also in Jamaica. So this is very interesting. And here Stephen Batty says, by the way, we do have shelters for men.
Do we?
Or do we have shelters for men in Kenya? But make a note of that, and you're going to answer this
Shelters,
question.
so both men and women.
Yeah, because Slay was also asking about shelters for women. So you're going to answer that question. And then Slay says shelters in US, I believe, serve both men and women.
Correct.
And then I see here, Stephen Batty says there are none kwa podcast walisema, so give us a bit more meat and bones on that. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. Naona watu wa YouTube wamelala, but at least Glado is there. Glado says something.
Jakarabondi yuko hapa amesema kitu, amesema Mr. Rungu mentioned that most gender violence is men harming women, but doesn't framing it this way risk dividing men and women instead of focusing on the real causes, like how society raises us? And I think that this was already answered.
Yeah, but make a note of that, Irungu.
Yes.
There's so many questions that are coming in on that. Yeah, there's so many questions that are coming in on that. So
then from Val, she says, do you think the silence of female representatives, women reps, on women stems from government control or societal expectations of women being submissive, aka Nakuru women leader silent? So that's something, and I think I can see where that would go, but Bwana Irungu, please make sure you note that. And then from Daktari Wangusi, he says he's checking in, and he's basically, this is directed to you directly, Bwana Erogo, saying karibu na usitoke hapa kabla kuanzisha chapter hapa. Ali ata facilitate.
Well, I'm already been given
Chairman.
I'm by as long as ile bahasha brown. You know those brown bahasha.
That is haram because that's a bribery.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Chairman ameanguka.
Good one. That's a
He
good
hasn't
one.
even taken the seat. And he has now failed.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I was checking to make sure.
You were checking to make sure that
I was making sure,
testing.
because in this group we check and balance each other. I was checking to see those checks and
If those
balances.
checks and balances.
Yes, and they're clearly working.